Section 1, Introduction. Hey there, KonnichiWOW fam. Have you ever wondered how Japan, a country that deliberately isolated itself from the world for over 2 centuries, managed to keep up with global advancements? Well, today we're unlocking a fascinating chapter of Japanese history known as Rangaku, or Dutch learning. In an era when Japan had closed its doors to almost the entire world, the Dutch found a way in, not just with their trade goods, but also with their knowledge and culture. You might be scratching your head thinking, Dutch of all countries, why the Dutch? And that's exactly the mystery we're about to unravel. From secretive trading posts to underground study groups, Rangaku was so much more than a simple exchange of goods. It was the exchange of revolutionary ideas that shaped Japan as we know it today. So grab a cup of matcha tea or a pack of stroopwafels. Today's story has something for everyone. Let's hop into our time machines and transport ourselves back to Japan's Sakoku period. Section 2. The Era of Sakoku, a land closed off. So here we are, smack in the middle of Japan's Sakoku era. But what is Sakoku exactly? The term translates to closed country, and that's pretty much what Japan was from the 1630s until 1853. The Tokugawa shogunate had enacted policies to minimize foreign influence, fearing that it could destabilize their rule. This meant that for more than 200 years, Japan was isolated from the world. During this period, the only window to the west was through the Dutch East India Company, or VOC in its Dutch acronym. They had access to a tiny man-made island in Nagasaki Bay called Dejima. Now don't picture a sprawling island paradise. Dejima was more like a walled prison, measuring only about 120 by 75 meters. Yeah, that's about the size of a football field. But why the Dutch? Why did Japan allow this teeny-tiny exception? The answer is fascinating. You see, the Dutch were primarily interested in trade and profit, not in spreading religion like the Portuguese or the Spanish. Japan was already wary of Christianity, as it was seen as a tool for Western colonization. So the Dutch won this exclusive golden ticket, mainly because they kept their Bibles at bay and focused solely on business. It was in this backdrop that Rangaku, or Dutch learning, started to emerge. It began as a form of medical study, but soon expanded to include things like astronomy, cartography, and even language. It was an intellectual movement that reverberated through Japanese society, offering a glimpse of the world beyond their borders. And trust me, the story of how these Dutch traders became accidental educators is nothing short of a Hollywood epic. Section 3. The Mechanics of Rangaku, the Knowledge Pipeline. You might be wondering how in a country as tightly sealed off as Japan, knowledge could flow so freely from the Dutch. The reality is that it wasn't easy, and it took an extraordinary group of people to make it happen. Let's start with the word Rangaku itself. Literally translating to Dutch learning, the term doesn't just imply knowledge from the Netherlands, but also signifies any Western knowledge that came through Dutch channels. This was a workaround, a loophole in the system that Japan was more than willing to exploit. Despite the restrictions of the Sakoku era, there was a burgeoning community of scholars and translators in Nagasaki, the gateway of Rangaku. These were not your everyday scholars. They were highly specialized experts who learned the Dutch language, often through second or third-hand materials. Many of them never even met a Dutch person, believe it or not. Books played an instrumental role in this transfer of knowledge. Once they made it past the heavily scrutinized checkpoints at Dejima, these books, covering everything from anatomy to zoology, were copied and disseminated throughout Japan. In a time where information was the most valuable currency, these books were literally worth their weight in gold. One famous character in the Rangaku saga is Sugita Genpaku. He is best known for translating the Dutch anatomy book Ontleedkundige Tafelen into Japanese. And you won't believe how he did it. He attended an autopsy of an executed criminal and compared the human anatomy with the illustrations in the book, validating the text in real time. Can you imagine the commitment and courage it took to make that happen? These efforts weren't just academic exercises. Rangaku significantly contributed to the modernization of Japan, particularly in fields like medicine and technology. The import of Western mechanical clocks, telescopes, and other technological marvels changed Japan's understanding of mechanics and engineering. These were monumental shifts in a society that had been closed off for centuries. So next time you admire Japan's technological prowess, remember that it has its roots in this curious and resourceful period, a time when a few brave individuals looked beyond their borders and said, "There's a whole world out there and we want to understand it." Section 4. The End of Rangaku and the Dawn of Modern Japan. Just like all good things, the Rangaku era had to come to an end. But don't worry, it's not a sad ending. Rather, it's the kind of finale that sets the stage for a new beginning, the Meiji Restoration. The story takes a pivotal turn with the arrival of American Commodore Matthew Perry and his black ships in 1853. They were not there to exchange pleasantries or books. They were there to force Japan to open up trade with the United States. The sight of these steam-powered warships, far superior to anything Japan had at the time, jolted the nation into action. The isolation policy was clearly no longer sustainable. In many ways, the foundations laid by the Rangaku scholars were critical in helping Japan transition into this new era. They had spent decades absorbing and adapting Western knowledge, and when the floodgates finally opened, Japan was better equipped to understand and engage with the rest of the world. The Meiji Restoration, which officially began in 1868, was a transformative period that led to the modernization and westernization of Japan. Many of the Rangaku scholars became key figures in the new government, advising on everything from technology to foreign policy. Their expertise was no longer a subversive act, but a highly valued skill. It was a vindication of their life's work and a tribute to the unquenchable thirst for knowledge that characterized the Rangaku era. This period of rapid modernization saw Japan evolve from a feudal society to a world power in just a few decades. Railroads were built, factories were established, and Japan's military was restructured along Western lines. By the turn of the century, Japan had defeated both China and Russia in wars, marking its arrival as a global player. So as we look back, it's clear that the Rangaku era was not just an interesting footnote in Japanese history. It was a stepping stone, a critical juncture that allowed Japan to leap from medieval traditions into the modern world. And it all began with a small group of inquisitive minds who dared to look beyond the horizon, breaking both rules and barriers in their quest for understanding. Conclusion. The lasting legacy of Rangaku. Rangaku wasn't just a period of knowledge exchange, it was a transformative era that served as a conduit for Japan's transition from isolation to modernization. The Dutch scholars and their Japanese counterparts set the stage for a nation ready to absorb, adapt, and innovate. This brief but significant episode in Japan's history is a testament to the power of cross-cultural learning. Rangaku showed us that even in the most unlikely circumstances, amidst strict isolationist policies and cultural barriers, curiosity finds a way. It's fascinating to think how books on medicine, astronomy, and engineering, translated in small rooms by candlelight, would one day help shape a modern, global superpower. But such is the power of knowledge, and such was the impact of Rangaku. If you found this journey through Japan's Dutch learning period as fascinating as we did, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories from the land of the rising sun.